attire would incorporate the elements of prison's garb. But now, however, I stepped into unfamiliar territory. I had some pictures of the posters of the 1930s. Unfortunately, I lost them, but you obviously believe that I have these pictures. Stalin on the background of the Kremlin. In the late 1930s, there were a lot of them. Again, Stalin with children, and usually Hoover stature of Stalin, sort of oversized, bigger than Kremlin, in all my posters, and there are some new Kamar Melamed sort of parodic pictures of the Kremlin as some kind of, also Stalin and the Kremlin as some kind of cliche of the time that they use Kamar Melamed to use in their paintings.
So these jokes are inserted into courses that are about literature or about. Can you give me some examples of the course titles? Course title, Russian, what I teach to undergraduates. Russian culture, Russian culture of the 20th century, short story, that's what I teach. Okay.
And that's undergraduates, not Russian majors, not Russian minors, generally just very general.
So I'm guessing that the students that are taking these courses are coming from all different
backgrounds, yes.
And all different backgrounds probably don't know Russian and are just maybe know a small amount about Russian culture. So, like our UVic students, generally, when they're coming to these courses for the first time. So how much background preparation do you need to give them? Like, for instance, in the jokes, do you explain ahead of time what komsomolets is? Is this an opportunity to give them some background information about specific pieces of culture from the 1930s, or?
Yes, of course, it could be some, some other class could be dedicated to something else, to Stalin's cult or something. Something of this sort. Of course, in short story, it's not the case, but in short story, I just give them jokes as basically as short pieces of literature. I have an article in English, and here I also try to sort of translate everything, not really give any puns, and these jokes basically work with students. They don't die out of laughter, but
they get it.
They get it. So I have this article that I give them as a reading, and it's pretty simple, something similar to what I was doing now. So they read this, they read the joke. But we also can look at one joke like this, of course, with the help. Here they would need.
I was just thinking about the joke about the peasant coming to Moscow, looking at the Kremlin and thinking about Stalin. So that peasant in the 1930s is kolhoznik, right? So there's a chance to explain right there about collectivization, and also that that peasant who is looking at Stalin and mistaking that Stalin is trapped inside the Kremlin by these guards, that peasant is also trapped in the countryside by new laws about internal passport system, right? So that's
there is this possibility, although I'm talking here mostly about Stalin's cult and a parody, some kind of parody, and the prisons and so on. But of course, there are ways to talk about these themes, because the Kremlin also in some ways symbolizes the whole country, the Soviet Union, and Kremlin Wall could serve as some kind of Soviet border, and there are jokes of this sort too. Why the Soviet border is on lock, na zamke. So the Soviet people would not run away. So in this way, sort of the Kremlin as a prison, and Kremlin as and the Soviet Union with borders somehow are similar, and the Kremlin becomes in some way the symbol of the Soviet Union. Again, in positive and negative terms. About the collective farm, actually, I didn't. I can talk just basically. I'm speaking just about peasant, and basically it's a little bit later joke, and the collectivization brings sort of completely, not completely, but somewhat different background. But I have jokes about that too.
Well, I think you're right when you said that they're primary sources, right? They are the words, the vocabulary, and the voice from that time. So
right.
In that way, it's like a little window for students into a whole
right.
different era, a whole different
right.
culture.
Right. Agree.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you. That's the first time in my life I've associated Stalin with humor. My mother's family were kulaks, and most of them didn't survive Stalin's era, and most of her uncles were taken away by Stalin's police. So the first time in my life I've actually laughed at a joke about Stalin. So I'm going to remember that joke about the Kremlin and the peasant and share with my brother and cousins, but I never associated humor with Stalin.
Yeah. Yeah, of course the later jokes about that time are even, could be even more interesting. These ones are apparently composed, so-called, or made up at that time in the 1930s. So it also is based on my research. I also collect these jokes. I have a nice collection.
That's what I wanted
These
to ask
ones
about.
are the ones that I could translate, and those that more or less work in this environment, in this way.
Mm-hmm. Actually, this is what I wanted to ask about. Where do you find the jokes? There's actually a collection edited by David Brandenberger, combining extensive archival and Harvard interview project and Western publication sources. But you have your own research in.
I have my own, which I sort of from older years, basically. From some memoiristic accounts, but mostly actually Americans, because you couldn't, Americans or, and also the emigres of the second wave, the World War II immigration. There are some publications Some of them are pretty rare, hard to find, but it's true that a lot of people already found them. I never looked at the archives for that, and I don't know even how you could find archives, the jokes in the archives. But yeah, but that's sort of my sources, these emigre collections. There were a number of them, and all sorts of little jokes here and there in different memoristic accounts. But of course, obviously these days people already know about these jokes. There are websites.
Well, but that raises the question of how reliable it is, and actually whether they originate in Stalin's time or much later.
Very good question. Very good question. So that's why I kind of believe my jokes and sort of my intuition, but I'm not really doing sort of textology. I'm not really putting it exactly in certain year or. But again, by background, by the dates of publication of the